Hello and welcome to Shoot the Breeze, where we take a nostalgic look at a random football magazine from the past. I'm Andy Smith, aka Scott's Footy Cards on Twitter, and with me is Tom Brogan.
Hello.
In each episode we'll invite a special guest to join us in trawling through the magazine and discuss anything contained within it. This could be anything from an article, to a photograph, to a competition, to an advert. Basically, if it's in it, then we'll talk about it. So sit back and let's shoot the breeze.
Wriggles clear, might just get the chip, and he does, he's scored! Oh, what a great tackle! He's done it! Oh, brilliant! Wiggling his way, that's an excellent one, and Didi! It's a goal, that's four for Clydebank. Excellent play by Hughes. I think the player of the match, and sweetly finished by Penny.
And this week our guest is Paddy Agnew. Paddy's a journalist based in Italy who covers Serie A and the Vatican. Thanks very much for coming on, Paddy.
Oh, very good to be here. Thanks very much for having me on.
Yep, thanks for joining us, Paddy.
So we're looking at a copy of Shoot from the 4th of April 1981. So we'll start off just by having a wee look at the cover. And on the cover, it's a picture of Liam Brady sipping from a bottle of water in a Juventus shirt with a gold chain hanging around his neck. And the headline is Italy worships Brady. Above the Shoot banner is £5 million transfer scoop, Luton Town team group, the other side of Maradona, and Ray Clemence on the League Cup final replay. And the cover price is 25 pence. Anything to pick out there from that cover?
Well, absolutely. First, I should say this. I've been in Italy since 1985. So Liam got here 4 years before me. Actually, 5 years before me, because he was here in at the end of the 1980 season with Arsenal. But he, when you say Italy worships Brady, I think that's what it's saying in the headline.
Yeah.
It's absolutely true. I mean, I remember this is the sort of situation which I can only tell you stories because there are plenty of them involved with Liam. But I mean, in 1994, Liam came down to Naples for an Italian World Cup warm-up game, Italy against Germany or something like that, I think. And it was just a friendly, but he came down as the Italian expert to do something for the BBC. And I saw him the next morning after the match. We were both sort of walking along the seafront in Naples, which is a lovely place. And I said to him, I haven't talked to you for a long time. Let's have a cup of coffee. So we nip into this very fashionable bar. We sit down, but I got very little chat with. I was there for about an hour and a half with Liam. We got very little chat out of him because our conversation was interrupted every 2 seconds by somebody coming up to him and saying, "Oh, Brady, fantastico! Non ti ho visto per tanto tempo. Che grande giocatore!" And you know, Brady was somebody who had whose reputation was sky high when he came to after his first 2 seasons in Italy, and he was a quality player, and the sort of quality player who could fit into what was then the best club football being played anywhere. And he fitted in really, really well. And it's not for nothing that, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people know this, but the Juventus team that he played basically was 3/4 of the side that won the 1982 World Cup in Spain. He'd played with them for the last 2 years. And that was the level that he was immediately at and felt very comfortable at. And they looked to him as, not just that they thought this is a useful lad to have, but this is actually the perfect leader for us. And he would have stayed at Juventus probably for quite some number of other seasons, except that the Juventus owner, who in those days was the legendary Gianni Agnelli, the avvocato, the owner of Fiat, who had a particular enthusiasm for Michel Platini, and of his own accord, without telling anybody, he hopped off to France and signed up Platini before the end of the season. And even though Brady had played 2 seasons, won 2 championships with them. He had to go because in those days you could only have 2 foreign players per Serie A team, and he had to make way for Michel Platini. And I know it was for Liam it was very disappointing because he'd done so well, and he Boniperti, the legendary former Juventus striker, the guy who in those days was the team manager. He called his team manager, the commercial manager. I mean, he called him. He called him up and he told him, "Look, Liam, you better come round to the house. There's something I'm going to need to tell you." And he got him round the house and said, "Look, Liam, Agnelli's gone and bought Platini. You're out." And Boniperti said the 2 of us sat there for a while and we just cried. We just cried because, I mean, I thought Liam was such a great player and Liam was getting on so well. So it was so what I'm saying is that Brady was a big figure in Italian football.
There's quite a question. Did they know what they were expecting or what they were going to get in Italy, or was it a case of he came over and then they were surprised? So do you know?
No, the general public didn't know. Obviously, I remember I spent a week with Liam when he was at Arsenal, and just about 2 months before the end of that season when he was going to Italy. And I remember talking to Don, what was it? Don Howe, was that what he called? Don Howe, the great coach at Arsenal those days. And he said that the Juventus scouts and the people who looked at Brady were very excited about him, but the vast majority of the public didn't didn't know much about him. Remember, this is 1980. It's pre-satellite TV. It's pre-internet. It's pre-mobile phones. It's a long time ago. So you didn't see much activity, and you certainly didn't. You only saw a few grainy, often black and white images of football that wasn't being played in Britain and Ireland. If you lived in Britain and Ireland, that is.
Yeah.
So they didn't know what they're going to get, but when they got him. It took them about 10 seconds to work out this guy is a fucking gift to us. This guy is really going to be good because it's a left-sided player is always a great thing. From Brady to Maradona and back again, and they hadn't got a player in that position in the Juventus team, but he was also a player who could do. Liam could do anything. I mean, Liam could make the ball sing, and he could make the ball talk. He was very, very good player. And on top of that, one of the things that people always say, Italians have always said to me about Liam, something that I wouldn't have thought of, because I came here in 1985. I didn't see it happen. But at the end of that season, when he already knew that Agnelli had bought Platini, that he was on his way out, in the very last game of the season, he opted to take the penalty, which won Juventus the league championship that year. And lots of Italians said, it's amazing that he took that. I mean, if it was anybody else who would have deliberately missed it, they would have been so pissed off with the club. But I mean, obviously, Liam was a fantastic professional, and the fans loved him for that as well.
So if we go into the first 2 pages, and so pages 2 and 3 are all about Liam Brady at Juventus.
Yeah. And
a few comments there from his teammates at the time about what a good player he was.
Yeah.
And his statement then, it says Giovanni Trapattoni, the Juventus manager, had Brady at the top of his list when the Italian FA decided last year to open the frontiers to 1 foreign player per club. Yeah.
No, he was you remember, the thing about Italian football was that there was a period from after the war to 1980 when they had a couple of setbacks at international level. They decided with far too many foreign players, far too many Argentines, Brazilians, let's close the doors. And they closed the doors. So there were no foreign players, but they reopened the doors in 1980. And you had, just a small number of players. I think the first season it was just one, and second season it was two per team, and it was people like Ruud Krol, the great Dutch defender, Zico. God, I can't remember any of those off the top of my head, but they were the best that was available at the time, and they were the sort of players who, in today's football world, would be heading to the Premiership.
So, is there anything there, Andy? Any wee quotes you've seen there from those 2 pages of his teammates talking about him?
Read me some of the quotes, lads, because you've got me at a disadvantage here. I can't read it off the screen, and I haven't got the quotes here in front of me. Read me a couple of them.
So Trapattoni says, I knew Liam was very, very good. Now everybody agrees. Some of my assistants were not so sure. They were afraid that the change would prove too much for him and that he could not cope with the difficulties and the style of Italian football. But he's settled down in the best and fastest way possible. And he is already in every sense one of us.
That's great. That's a great quote. That's a great quote. That's a great quote to start with. Because remember, if there's one nationality that has not been very successful in Italian football over the years, it's nationality. I mean, the Anglophonics, British football representatives, because that's what Brady was seen as he was coming from Arsenal. The late Jimmy Greaves, who's just died recently. I mean, he was. We all know he was a wonderful striker, scored goals all the time, but he couldn't settle down at all in Italian football. And I think he had a sort of run between autumn and Christmas at AC Milan, and then went home and signed for Spurs. And that was what, when Trapattoni says there that his assistants were worried that Brady mightn't adapt to Italian football. I think what Trapattoni was talking about was they were worried that he mightn't adapt to Italian life, Italian culture, Italian language, food, etc. I don't think that there were really much worry about his technical ability because he was so outstanding. And then the thing about Liam was he's a smart guy. Always was a smart guy, and he very quickly set about learning Italian. He still speaks very good Italian, and he settled into living in Italy with a lot of enthusiasm, and he still has, he's still very attached to Italy, and he looks back in his Italian days with great fondness. Let me tell you one thing about Liam, that when I eventually got to Italy, and I came here without any work organized, I came here, I was already a relatively experienced journalist, and I'd already done quite a bit of football journalism, but when I got here, my contacts, I started off in journalism in Ireland with the McGill magazine and the Sunday Tribune in Dublin. So my contacts were all with Ireland. So to begin with, I mean, I worked there for a while with everybody else, from The Economist to The Guardian, but that's another story. It was obvious to me that the first thing I would have to do when I got to Italy was to make contact with Liam, and to but he was going to be the one gig I had at the time was I was writing 2 columns a week for an Irish evening newspaper, the Evening Press, and so it was pretty important to get in contact with Liam. So I was here about 2 weeks when Italy, when I got the first chance to go to a match that he was playing in. It was because by this stage he was playing for Inter. And they were due to play Pisa, who were in Serie A in those days. And I thought, well, that'll be a chance to go up there. I'll go up there and see if I can get hold of Liam. So I went up for the match. And the match turned out to be a disaster for Inter, and a famous day for Pisa, because Pisa won. They won 1-0. And anyway, I was hanging around after the match in what passed for a press room. Well, it wasn't much of a press room in the Pisa Stadium, and it was a little stadium it is, and there were no sign of any players being brought out, no sign of any press conference, and I eventually, in those days, very halting Italian, tried to find out from my colleagues what was happening, and they said none of them seemed to know, and then the consensus was that nobody was going to come out for a press conference. So I thought, well, geez, lads, I've come all this way. I need to see Liam. So it's amazing that I would think of doing this because you couldn't do it these days. I thought to myself, well, I'll go around to the other side of the stadium to the team bus. And I walked around to the other side of the stadium. And there was the team bus. And there were a couple of cops there, but there were no sort of crowd barriers around. And I walked up to the team bus, and Karl-Heinz Rummenigge was the centre forward for International Station. He was standing on the steps, and I knew who he was. I knew he'd speak English. I said to him, and I said, "Can I? Sorry to bother you. I want to speak to Liam Brady. I'm an Irish journalist. Is he on the bus?" And Rummenigge laughed at me, and he leaned back and he shouted down the bus, and he said, "What's your name?" I said, "Paddy Agnew." He said, "Liam, there's a fella here called Paddy Agnew, wants to talk to you." And Liam said, "Oh yeah, let him on." So Rummenigge stands back, and I get up onto the bus and walk down the aisle of the bus to where Liam's sitting. And Liam looks at me, and he shakes his head, and he says, "Paddy, you shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be on the bus, you know." And I finished that story because I was at one of the great indulgences my wife allows me every now and again is to go to the Charlton Festival, the horse race meeting, and I was at it 2 years ago, pre-COVID times, and I met Liam, who I hadn't seen for years, and Liam looked at for a second. He didn't quite realise who it was, and then he looked at me, and then he smiled at me and said, "Paddy, get off the bus." So, however, Liam was a terrific source of information on those days. He told me all sorts of stuff, and he was. I haven't had access to a player of that quality almost ever since, and at the same level, because I could talk to him anytime. He'd tell me all sorts of things.
I mean, one of the things that Tom and I, when we're doing lots of these shoot magazines, that we notice is that in interviews and columns, they're very forthright and they're very open. Players and managers about what they say. Was Liam the same then? Was he quite open with you, or was it a case of because he
was very open with me because he eventually got to know me and knew that I wouldn't say and I shouldn't say. But he told me things which he couldn't print, and I didn't print. But on the record, Liam was very careful. Yeah, actually, he was very sensible. He, in those days this was the Hollywood of football, and the pressure was huge, and you could start a row out of nothing. And you still can, It's worse now, obviously, in the world of social media and the pressure on players in the Premiership. It must be pretty tremendous. But Liam was aware of it even in those days when your local TVs and the daily sports papers were actually your biggest pressure. But he was careful not to say anything stupid.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the interesting things from the article, Tom, that I pick out is he's talking about being prepared for coming to Italy. He knows it's going to be hard because of the experience Kevin Keegan had in Germany. So he's, you mentioned, Paddy, about how he's an intelligent man. So he's coming prepared. He's looking at what's happening with other British players abroad, and he's taking that on board rather than just, maybe. An example you could give is like Ian Rush, who went unprepared and totally blinkered as to what the experience was going to bring for him. So I think that's quite interesting that he's taken the Kevin Keegan scenario and saying right, okay, I've got to be prepared for a hard time like he's had
I
in
remember,
Germany.
no, I read this article. I can't read it properly here, but I did read it when you sent it to me, and I thought that was a very interesting thing because Liam had never said that to me, but he was obviously aware of the difficulties, and I'm sure the Jimmy Greaves experience didn't go by him. I'm sure he was aware of how that went wrong. I mean, the thing about Ian Rush and Jimmy Greaves. About both of them is that they had difficulty adapting to a different place. I mean, there's a legendary quote from Ian Rush, which I'm not sure how true it is, but it's certainly emblematic of his experiences. He said that being in Italy felt like being in a foreign country all the time. And Ian Rush was also a bit like in football, as we all know. What really matters is that the results go your way and you can put up with all sorts of things. Yeah. Results did not go Ian Rush's way. He wasn't in a nearly as good a Juventus team as Liam had been in. And that made his short, he was 2 years in Italian football. It made it very difficult for him. He had other problems like he'd be trying to put petrol in the car, and he couldn't work out the language, and he kept on I think he put diesel in a petrol car at least 3 times in his first 2 months, in Turin, things like that. They're small things, but Boniperti thought he'd cheer him up by ordering him a couple of crates of Welsh beer. At one point, I'm not sure whether that really did cheer him up. But the worst thing was that he just wasn't playing in a good team, and it wasn't his fault. It's if the team isn't playing well, there's not an awful lot the striker can do about it.
I guess nowadays, like foreign players who come in would be looked after to a huge degree. You'd have people to do these things, which maybe wasn't the case back then.
No, I think that's absolutely true. There wouldn't have been the same level of detail the players were left to get on with it themselves to a certain extent, and the the problem was they had closed borders for so long, so they weren't used to having foreign players. Yeah, that's true. But I mean, the very good ones, obviously. Were most, and Ian Rush was a very good player, no question about that. But he was a bit unlucky. But most of the good ones, you're talking about Brady, Platini, Maradona, players like that, they didn't have any bother adapting to Italian football.
Yeah.
And was it a surprise when he chose to get back to England and move to West Ham?
Well, he was at the end of his time in Italy then. I mean, after they bought Platini, he had to leave Juventus. He signed up for Sampdoria, who were a newly promoted team, and a team who eventually won the league in 1991, and who played some very good football. And Liam played some very good football for them too. And then he had 2 seasons with Inter, but by the end of that he'd had 6 seasons. By the end of that period, his star was a bit on the wane, not because he wasn't playing well, he was still playing well, but he had at least one bad knee injury that messed him up. And he ended up then going to Ascoli. And Ascoli were another of those newly promoted sides that were up and down between Serie A and Serie B. And he had a fairly rocky time there, in the sense that the club's finances are a bit funny. I don't think Liam ever got paid for any wages by Astley, for example. So, and he got fed up with all that and packed up and headed off to West Ham, where at least he thought he'd get his wages.
And do you think he should maybe have made a bit more of a success as a manager? I know, obviously, the spell up here in charge of Celtic, but would you have seen him as more successful as a manager, as a coach?
I don't know. Liam, I remember he told me once after he'd coached Celtic that he'd been a failure as a manager. And I was surprised, but I think Liam felt, and he's very happy now in well, at least when last I heard of him, he was coaching the youngsters at Arsenal.
Yeah,
and he was very happy with that. You would have thought with the footballing head he had, the footballing intelligence that he had, that he would have been a very capable manager. But I don't know. You'd have to ask everybody from Ancelotti to Jurgen Klopp and back again what it's required to be a manager. But obviously, at certain points, you have to be able to exercise a type of authority over players that requires a lot of it requires a harder mentality than Liam have. Liam probably was too decent a person to kick ass in the way maybe you should kick ass.
Mm-hmm. And before we turn the page, I noticed Paddy, the article's written by Giancarlo Galavotti. Was he a journalist you were aware of in Italy?
Yeah, well, Giancarlo used to be the Gazette dello Sportsman in London. I knew Giancarlo very well. He was very interested, as the London correspondent, he was very interested in the whole Brady deal while he was still an Arsenal player. So he followed Liam very closely. And I would see him every now and again. Actually, I'd only ever see him when we got to World Cups and European Championships. He'd turn up then. But he was very knowledgeable writer.
All right, Andy, we go over the page.
Yep.
So it's quite an interesting article here on page 4. So there's a wee bit here about Coventry City, which says Coventry plan for brighter soccer, and this is Coventry City are preparing to launch plans to brighten soccer for their loyal supporters. They are imposing a ban on players passing back to the goalkeeper and will issue instructions to goalkeeper Les Sealey to abandon the 3-step rule. Manager Gordon Milne explains, as from now, we shall operate both plans in Central League matches at Highfield Road and hopefully take the fear and the boredom out of the game. If it's a success, there's no reason to doubt it will be. I would like to think that we might introduce it in a First Division match before the season ends. Milne believes fans are frustrated when players pass back. It's killing the game, he says. I thought that was really interesting. This is 1981, so more than a decade before.
They were ahead of the time, weren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, they essentially it was the 1990 World Cup, Italia and Levante, that killed off the pass back.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much of that World Cup any of you guys saw, but it was a World Cup that there were some interesting games in it, but there were some horrors in that one. And the final, Argentina, West Germany, was possibly the worst World Cup final of modern times. Mm. And one of the reasons was that both sides were spent a lot of time passing back to the goalkeeper.
I say that in my personal opinion, the change to the pass-back law has been the best change in my lifetime, the best change to football, because it just absolutely changed it all for the better.
No, it turned football upside down. You're absolutely right. Mm. And it completely revolutionised the role of the goalkeeper, as we all know.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it seems as though they're trying to have that sort of same effect every single season with, tinkering with laws all the time, and it's like, I keep saying this as well. We should change things when they need changing. They change things all the time, and it's like people question why we need to change it. The pass-back thing needed to be resolved, needed something to be done. And now it seems as though every season they've got a quota of things that they need to change, which is ruining the game for me.
Well, but obviously, I mean, in the age of VAR, things are there are decisions happening every game you watch that are just staggering. I mean, take this week's Champions League game. Did any of you see? Who was it? It was Wolfsburg and Seville. Seville got a late penalty in a game in which Wolfsburg had been by far the better team. They got a late penalty, but I mean, it was a defender tried to tackle a guy in the area, slightly missed his tackle. He hit the fellas He didn't hit. He just touched the fella's boot. That's all. And the fella still made his pass. The pass still went to a Seville teammate, but the referee gave gave a penalty, and it was one of a number of different penalties, like the Milan penalty in their game against Atletico Madrid. There are a lot of. You're in a situation now where there's so much VAR. Referees seem to be under so much pressure that they just give penalties. They give penalties. For example, let me say one thing. I was talking to somebody who used to play for Lazio just today. This guy actually works for my bank, and I was in the bank this morning. I was talking to him, and we when I'm in there and I'm doing whatever I have to do, we always have a resume of how things are going, and we talked about the Champions League game, and he was saying something that I think a lot of players feel, that the penalty handball ruling that VAR creates is just mad. That the idea that a penalty, it doesn't have to be a deliberate handball. The idea that there's no volontariat, but it's not. You don't do it meaningfully and deliberately. That somebody can be standing a meter away from you, blast the ball at you, hit your hand, and that's a penalty. For God's sake, that isn't a penalty. Never was a penalty. Never will be. A handball has to be deliberate. You have to, to stop the ball going to the net or whatever. But it's not because somebody blasts the ball at you and you bang into it. But I mean that's just what you're saying. You've tinkered with rules and regulations so much that the referees are erring too much on the unsafe side, because it's not the safe side.
Yeah, I agree with you when you're saying that they'll blow for a penalty or something. I think it's made them. I don't know about lazy is the word, but maybe they play it safe because they know they don't have to make a decision, because if it was a penalty, VAR's going to stop it, and so the same skills that aren't there for referees and linesmen, they lose. I mean, you see with linesmen as well, they don't put their flag up. They wait, and then they put the flag up. And it's like, well, listen, if you're that sure about it, put your flag up. Don't wait for something else to happen. And, the fact is, they're probably been told not to do that, but that information's not getting out to everybody. So, I mean,
linesmen certainly have been told not to do it, haven't they? They've been told to wait for the action to finish before they put up the flag. There's a logic to that.
Yeah.
But I do think what you're saying is right, that what you say, call it playing on the safe side. As far as I'm concerned, it's playing on the unsafe side, because it's just too many referees deciding I won't take responsibility for this, and we'll wait and see what VAR says. And you seem to me there'll always be in football. We all know it's not you. There'll always be decisions that are difficult, and there'll always be decisions that are hotly disputed, and sometimes are wrong. But I thought in the first few seasons of VAR, I thought we were doing quite well in rectifying a lot of bad errors. But we've just wondering if watching some of the games I've watched recently, if it's we're not sometimes aren't too trigger happy.
Yeah. There's been a lot of creep in VAR, hasn't there? Because it was brought in for specific circumstances and scenarios, and it seems to have been just expanded without anybody sort of telling us or asking us.
Yeah. Well, that's inevitable. As the players get used to it, as the public gets used to it, as everybody gets used to it, then you'll use it more. And you're right, it's crept in. It's been used a lot more. When it started off, we all thought it was going to be used maybe twice a game or 3 times in a match,
Yeah.
But not now.
Yeah. I mean, I said this before on this podcast, but for me, it's brought in for like that Thierry Henry incident against the Ireland in the World Cup playoff, where everybody, apart from the referee, can see quite clearly that that's a foul. And as soon as the referee watches the video, he goes, "Oh no, I've got that wrong." and you've got the technology to show him that in that second, and for him to correct the error in the moment. And I think that's the kind of thing that was brought in to correct. But then it's getting used for all these other wee things that we're struggling to see 4 or 5 replays in, and we're still trying to work out, was that a foul? Was it? Should it be?
No, I mean, I absolutely agree with you there. On the question of VAR, don't get me wrong, I've probably presented myself badly in the sense that, by and large, I am in favour of VAR. And the Thierry Henry or Frank Lampard's goal in the South African World Cup, things like that are such obvious injustices. They need to be cleared up. And VAR does that and does it well. On the whole, I think VAR is... I would go so far as to say it's like 90% of the time it's doing a fantastic job, but there is that 10% where I sometimes wonder about,
All right, so moving on to some of the wee snippets on this, these 2 news desk pages. There's a wee snippet here called Togetherness, and basically what this is, it's a list of players who were born in England but were all at that time current Republic of Ireland internationals. Jim McDonough and Eamon O'Keefe of Everton, Matt Lawson and Mick Robinson of Brighton, and just name a couple of others, Jerry Murphy of Crystal Palace, Gary Waddock, QPR, and Tony Grealish of Luton. Yeah,
well, I remember them all. Some of those players had terrific careers with the Irish team. Guys like Tony Grealish, for example, who wasn't sort of like a front page or back page star player in the first division in those days. But, every time he turned up for Ireland, he gave fantastic performances. And he played alongside Liam Brady and Jerry Daly. You remember the Manchester United player? And they were, it was a very useful midfield, those three. A lot of skill from Daly and Brady, and a lot of work rate and covering from Grealish. The same thing applied to players like Gary Buttle. He played in Jack Charlton's team at a certain point, and he was a very useful player.
Yeah, I mean, you'll have seen the sort of evolution of that Irish national side, Paddy, from the years of sort of being no hopers for tournaments to obviously the Jack Charlton years where you were doing things at tournaments to, I guess it's going a bit back the way again in recent times.
Yeah, we're back to being no hopers, it looks like. No, those were terrific days. And they were, people would often think that Jack Charlton was a bit rough and ready and a bit unsophisticated in his approach. And maybe it was to some extent, but Jack knew his football. Jack knew his football. He knew he could tell a good player from a bad player, no problems. And he was also, as we all know, a powerful figure and a commanding figure, and he got the team to play really well. I remember, this is just to point out how different things were. In 1988, when Ireland qualified for the European Championships, and it was their first appearance ever in a big finals tournament. In those days, like it never happened before, and the Irish press corps travelled around with the Irish team, and we would be staying in the same hotel. Now, that meant that on the day before, the Saturday before Ireland played England in their opening game in where was it? Dusseldorf. Jack couldn't be bothered. Well, it wasn't. He didn't want to have the hassle of taking them off to the designated training ground. Then right behind the hotel that we were all staying in, there was a pretty reasonable football pitch. Right behind it, I could stand on the balcony of my hotel room, and I could see everything. And we all did. And we watched an hour of Jack's training. And it was amazing stuff because he they talk about people working at set positions. And, he did this, for example. He said, right, lads, it's with 10 minutes to go. Well, 1-0 down. We get a corner. Now, Ray Houghton, where are you going to stand? Where are you going to stand? And he said, no, you're not to stand there, lads. And he said, get over there, you fucking idiot, this is true. He's saying it, and he went through several situations like that. But of course, the next day, it wasn't from a corner, but the next day, the guy who won the game with a header was Ray Houghton. But also, after that game, and this, again, this is the sort of thing cannot happen today, is, the players all came back to the hotel, and we all came back to the hotel, and we're all in the hotel, and we all had a drink together and a sing-song. All of us. And it went on for about 2 hours. And, and Jack was there in the middle with a big grin on, ear to ear, grinning away. And he'd be, every now and again, and everybody was singing a song, and Jack would be asking, I remember he was very fond of a song that the Fury brothers sang, Young Willie McBride. Where have you gone to, young Willie McBride? And Jack kept asking for that to be sung as well. But it was, it's not the same today. You don't get the same sort of access to teams like that.
All right, another couple of wee snippets there. There's a wee bit there called Dad's Protege, and it says Mike Imlach is hoping he can follow in his father's footsteps. Mike is an 18-year-old left back with Preston and the son of Stuart Imlach, who's a left winger with Bury, Derby, Nottingham Forest, Luton, Coventry, Crystal Palace in Scotland. And looking up his career, Mike made 52 starts and 5 sub-appearances in the English League between 82 and 84. Left Preston without making an appearance, signed for Leeds but didn't play there either. Made his debut with Peterborough. We played 53 times before 4 games with Tranmere Rovers. And of course, I'm aware of Stuart Imlach through his other son, Gary's terrific book on him. My Father and Other Working Class Heroes, I think it was called.
Yeah, I've just finished reading that maybe about a month ago or something. It's an absolute fantastic read. It's...
Yeah. Well, you've got me on that one, because I don't know that book. Right?
No,
I can't even remember Imlach very much.
Yeah.
It seems my problem is my memories are all oriented around Italian football for obvious reasons.
Yeah. But it's a terrific book, because he basically traces his father's career. Just after his father died, he goes and sort of traces his career through speaking to his former coaches and teammates and things like that. Yeah. It's a really interesting read. It's about him reconnecting with his dad as well. As well as a football biography as well. It's a really good book. Anything else you've seen there, Andy?
Well, there's so above that, togetherness, one that we spoke about. There is a bit about Sunday football. It says there's been a lot of talk about the possibility of Sunday football, but one man who hopes it amounts to nothing more than that is Swindon goalkeeper Jimmy Allen. He's the only player in the league who's intimated already that he would refuse to play on Sundays on moral or religious grounds. Now, I had a wee look about Jimmy, and he refused to play on a Sunday in January 1974, so this wasn't the first time that he'd actually refused to play. So he refused in 1974 with his manager, Les Allen, saying that he respected his views. So the manager says he respected his views, but he was then dropped from the first team and didn't play again until the start of season 76-77. So I guess saying that I respect your views and then dropping you for a full season and a half isn't really backing up that, is it?
It's not really respecting the views.
No. It's just I respect your views, but I don't respect you, so I'm dropping you. And so maybe that's what you meant. There's I think there's other bits in this magazine about Sunday football, is there? If I remember right. But I just thought that was quite interesting.
I remember all right. I mean, the if you were around in those days, it was a debate, because one was aware that on continental Europe there were big matches being played every Sunday, and people eventually, as the media machine got bigger and bigger, as TV became more and more important, the question was more and more asked: why don't we play on Sundays? It seems strange that people would have problems about it, but I mean, it was a generational thing, because I mean, I grew up in Northern Ireland in the 50s and 60s, Northern Ireland on a Sunday in the 50s and 60s, nothing was open, everything was closed. We had horses. I grew up with horses, and we had to exercise the horses. But my father would never let you take the horse out onto the public road on a Sunday. You couldn't do things like that. And your Swindon goalkeeper was, if it was Swindon Piper, he wasn't alone. There were plenty of people who feel that Sunday was the Sabbath. 6 days thou shalt labour, and the seventh thou shalt rest.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think a lot of today's players would be quite happy if they got a Sunday rest.
Do you know, I've actually thought about that recently. I don't know if maybe it was because I was reading this, but I've thought that, there is an argument just to don't have things open on a Sunday. Just, have it as a day that a lot of people can rest. I mean, society's moved on, and, because a lot of people work, Saturdays and things like that, maybe Sunday's the only time they can go shopping. But, I can get the, not from a religious point of view, but just from a general, everybody just relaxed point of view, and take it easy for the day.
One thing that, if it's taught us anything, if there's been anything positive about COVID and the COVID pandemic, it is that people have learned, that you can do without certain things. You can live a different life. You can live quietly. You can spend a lot of time between your own walls, and in your, not moving around. Yeah. And that it isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, totally agree. So just next day as well, Tom, I'm going to shoot. So Tom and I are Clydebank supporters, Paddy. So I'm going to shoehorn in a Clydebank reference. So the Billy's Problems talks about a Broth centre half, Billy Wells, who's decided to continue his recently interrupted playing career with Clyde. Now, Billy played in the 8-1 record victory, Clydebank versus Arbroath. So that's the shoehorn. But also what I didn't know was that Jimmy Bone played for Arbroath that game as well. Is that the same Jimmy Bone?
It would have been, yeah. He played for Celtic and St Mirren.
Yeah. So in Norwich City he played for as well. But I didn't know that Jimmy Bone played in that game. But there we go. There's the Clydebank shoehorn of the week.
How are Clydebank doing at the moment?
We're doing all right. We're doing all right. We got beat last night, but we're doing okay. We've got an SFA licence, which means we can play in the Scottish Cup, the proper Scottish Cup. So we're going to be live on BBC Scotland in a few weeks' time, which is a big deal for us.
Against who?
Against Elgin City. So we're in the West of Scotland Football League, which is what the sort of league below the Lowlands League. So we're on the path to try and get back into senior football again. I don't know if you remember, Paddy, the days of Clydebank supposedly going to Dublin to play. That was touted for a period.
They would join the Irish League.
Because we had some rogue owners at the time who were wanting to uproot the team and move it to Dublin. Not long after Wimbledon, around about the same time when that was being talked about with Wimbledon as well.
We were still going to play in the Scottish League, though. Is that right?
There's always been talk about exchanges between Ireland and Scotland on the club front. Do you remember there was a period when Shamrock Rovers and others were the idea was to get them to play in the Scottish First Division.
Right.
Those are the days where people like John Giles, Eamon Dunphy, Paddy Mulligan, and others were playing for Shamrock Rovers. They had actually some very experienced players. But anyway, same thing. That's always been talked about. The Irish Scottish sort of attempt to create their own footballing empire remained valid, and it keeps on. I say it keeps on turning up as a possibility. An Irish Scottish World Cup, for example.
The charity partner this season is the West Dunbartonshire Community Food Share. This is a charitable organisation that provides various services and support to the local community, including the following: a school uniform bank, school holiday brunch bags, food provisions, Christmas toy bank, cooking and growing lessons, and a baby bank. They provide essential support to the local community in supporting individuals and families, and we will be looking to support them in any way we can through the podcast. This will include drives for donations of food, money and support in the form of volunteers. We will also be raising awareness of the group to highlight the work that they do, but also to ensure that families and individuals who can benefit from the group are aware of these vital services. You can follow them on the West Dunbartonshire Community Food Share group on Facebook or West Dunbartonshire Community Food Share.co.uk for the website, and that's West Dunbartonshire with an N. You can also donate through our Just Giving page for the charity at justgiving.com/fundraising/shoot the breeze, one word. Also keep an eye on our Twitter accounts at shoottb_podcast and at Scott's Footy Cards for updates and news on our charity partner. We'd like to say a special thank you to Pete Wiley of the Mighty Wah for the use of the Story of the Blues in the music for our show. You can catch up with Pete on petewiley.co.uk, where you can check out the details of upcoming gigs and new music. We'd also like to thank our producer Diane Jardin for her great work and support on the podcast. Please check out transmissionroom.co.uk, where you can book music recording and rehearsal facilities in Clydebank.
So, Andy, can we jump to page 7 then?
Yep.
So page 7 is Tartan Talk with Derek Johnson. Can I ask, Paddy, have you ever ghostwritten a column for a footballer?
No.
No.
Oh, sorry, that's not true. I did. For about 3 different World Cups, I ghost wrote a column for Mark Lawrenson.
Right.
Which was very easy to do because Mark's a very easy guy to deal with, and he, as anybody who's ever seen him on Match of the Day, knows he's not short of an opinion, and he was very easy to deal with and talk to. So we became great friends. I always look forward to the World Cup because of that.
So this is a wee bit there, but Derek Johnson talking about how Rangers missed the magic of Europe because Rangers hadn't qualified for Europe that season. I've got to admit to feeling more than slightly envious when I watched the rerun of Graham Souness's marvellous 3 goals against CSKA Sofia on my video recorder at home. And I think he's just bragging that he's got a video recorder. And he goes on to talk about...
What year was that?
So that was the 80-81 season.
Yeah.
So that's the season Liverpool would have been on to win the European Cup that season. And I guess Rangers had failed to qualify.
Yeah. Yeah, and Souness was playing for who at that time?
Liverpool.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So I mean, you would have seen Souness with Sampdoria. He moved.
I did, yeah. I talked to him a couple of times when he was out here. I always found him very, very, again, another like good players. Often to me, I often think. I mean, you talk to them. Good players are smart, and Graham was very smart, and he made a lot of good observations about. The Italian football scene. My only pity with him was I didn't get a lot of time. I didn't get many occasions to get to know him. I'd like to have been able to talk to him more.
So Derek Johnson is talking a wee bit here about talking about playing against Johan Cruyff and Ajax when Rangers played Ajax in the very first sort of unofficial European Super Cup.
Yeah. What does he say about Cruyff? He wasn't bad. He could play about that boy.
Yeah. There seemed little or no room for manoeuvre until he whipped the ball over my head with a neat little flick, swept past me all in one breathtaking movement, and whacked an unstoppable shot past big Peter McCloy at the near post. I didn't even bother offering excuses. I just witnessed something out of the ordinary, something only someone blessed with the skill of a Johan Cruyff could produce.
Yeah, well, I don't know how much you saw Cruyff play. But he was capable of stuff like that.
Yeah,
he was in the same way that Maradona was capable of doing things that ordinary players wouldn't dream of attempting. You know? And then he was a phenomenal personality. Somebody had ideas about everything and knew what way he wanted the team organised, what way he wanted the club organised, and you know, and he was not a good person to cross because he would make it quite clear he didn't suffer fools. He didn't suffer fools gladly.
So we jump on now, Andy. Can we go to page 14?
Yep.
So page 14 is headline John walks it. So it's John Wark winning the Player of the Year award.
Can I just say it's a missed opportunity for the title, isn't it? It should be John Walks It, surely. Yeah. That's a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
So yeah, a picture of John Wark there in his dicky boat and dinner jacket, and picture of Gary Shaw of Aston Villa, who's a Young Player of the Year. And the special PFA Merit Award went to Swindon's John Trollope, who made a record 770 league appearances for his only club.
Yeah, I remember. I don't remember him, but I remember the other two. I remember Wark in particular. Wark was essentially Ipswich Town in those days, really, you know? Yeah. And he was a good player. And he had a fantastic season. Was his Ipswich Town not managed by Bobby Robson?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And they, you know, it was Robson was at the beginning of a very successful career, and you know, he went on to become England manager and had a good England team too. That didn't play badly in Mexico until it met Maradona. Didn't play badly in the 1990 World Cup, but you know, I'm sure. I don't know what Wark would say, but it would be interesting to know what he thought of Bobby Robson.
So did you spot Dickie Davies in the background there, Tom?
Oh yeah. I see him now. Yeah,
very unmistakable with his badger streak in the hair.
Yeah. So I said about John Trollope there. So he made his debut via Halifax Town in August 1960, and he played his last game for Swindon in November of 1980. And played a total of 889 times for Swindon.
That's a long career.
In all competitions, yeah, absolutely.
20 years.
Yeah.
It's quite a striking looking fella there as well, isn't he? With the blonde hair, sort of slicked back, and you know, quite strong features.
So the facing page there is Ray Clemence talking soccer. Ecstasy and agony. So this is about the League Cup final where they drew 1-1 with West Ham with the game going to a replay. And this is the kind of thing I loved at the time when I bought Shoot is getting things like that where you had the players giving you the wee inside on things like that. You know, going, you know, picking his way to die for penalty kicks and you know, talking about the referee and things like that. I really thought that was great at the time when you were getting these kind of insights from players. Do
you think you get the same insights today?
No, I don't think so. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. You know, I remember very well, obviously as a player, but one of the privileges of my career as a soccer reporter is I've been to about 3 World Cups, but I've been to about 7 European Championships. And at those things, you meet all sorts of people. I remember meeting Ray at European Championships in Sweden, 1992. The ones that Denmark, you know, came in off the beach to win. And I'd been listening to a few months before that. I'd been listening to. In Italy, I've been listening to the European, what was the Champions Cup then, on the BBC, on the World Service, and it was Sampdoria and Barcelona. Barcelona won the Koeman free kick, I think. But there were. I found, you know, in those days that there was no internet, there was no satellite TV, and so if you got something like the World Service, sometimes you got it and sometimes you didn't. So I tuned in and the match was already started. This fellow was commenting on the game. I was thinking, God, that's interesting. Yeah, that's it. Jeez, he knows what he's talking about. And it was Ray Clemence.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember seeing him in Sweden, in Stockholm. And I told him that story, and he said, I said, well, thanks very much, but I ought to know a bit about football. I've been playing it long.
Right, okay, and if we move on from here, page 16, there's got a couple of wee Scottish stories there. Fast flood and clear out at Dundee. So, fast floods is...
Is it just a coincidence we have all these Scottish stories, is it?
Yeah. We find that the shoot actually covered Scotland quite well.
Scottish football was much more, was much stronger. No?
Yeah, absolutely it was. Yeah, in those days, yeah. There wasn't much between Scottish and English teams when they played in Europe in those days. You would still expect the English team to win, but there really wasn't much between.
Yeah, but but I mean, it's not for nothing that the first British side to win the Champions Cup was Celtic.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. 1967, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, that was before Liverpool put together all their titles.
Yeah.
Before Nottingham Forest won it twice. I mean, it was a different world. And Scottish football was a different world. Scottish football was a very serious level of, obviously Scottish football still regularly produces good players, but I can't see it as being in the same level of competitiveness as those days were.
Yeah. I think part of the reason why there's so much Scottish content in it is probably because there was so many Scottish players also in England, so there was more of an interest to see what was potentially the next ones coming over the border.
Well, you're right, because in those days the only foreigners were either Irish or Scottish, and the old Welshmen. No, they weren't. You weren't in the Harlem Globetrotter All Stars days of the Premiership, where you have everybody from all over the world playing in the Premiership. Yeah, and then the only foreigners were the Scots and the Irish and the Welsh.
I think this may have been the sort of time actually when it did start with Franz Tyson and stuff, probably at Ipswich.
Yeah, Franz Tyson, Arnold Muren, yeah.
So I think that and then Spurs, obviously, with Ardiles and Villa.
But when did Tyson and Muren arrive?
So I want to say that was sort of
mid 80s, no?
Yeah, but 1980, yeah. And
was it the early 80s? Yeah?
You looking it up, Andy?
Yeah.
I remember. No, I just remember Muren playing for Holland in the 1988 European Championship final, the one where the Soviet Union.
Yeah, he provided the pass for Van Barsten's goal. I think
Exactly, good man, and fantastic pass. But he was a fantastic player. But I can't remember how long he'd been playing in English football. I suppose he'd been there for a while.
You're going to be surprised. 1978 is when he came to Ipswich Town.
There you are. So, I am surprised.
I mean, he had a bit of a career with. He'd won the European Cup with Ajax. Before that, his brother before him had won the European Cup with Ajax, and he went back to Ajax and won the Cup Winners' Cup with Ajax in his second spell. And like you say, he was playing at 37, I think, for Holland. Yeah, but so you had him and you had Ricky Villa and Ozzy Ardiles coming after the World Cup in '78. So that was a sprinkling of fun.
That's right. Do you remember when Ozzy turned up very early on? I think he was playing in the League Cup game against Liverpool, and what's his name? I've forgotten his name. The big Liverpool central defender, was it Tommy Smith?
Tommy Smith, yeah.
Tommy Smith clattered into him quite early on in the game, and it would have killed anybody else. But I mean, Ardiles bounced on the ground and got himself up again and played on. and I remember the media asked Tommy, what were you doing with that tackle? What was the significance of that? He said, "No, I was just welcoming him to the first division."
Yeah. Straight red card these days. Straight red card.
So is there anything, Andy, from those two, John Flood moving from Sheffield United to Airdrie and...
Well, I mean, I'm just drawn to John Flood's picture. And, you know, if you had a choice nowadays, you wouldn't allow them to put that sort of picture of you. It's not the most flattering a picture. He looks almost as embarrassed by it. It looks like a school photo, actually. You know,
It does, yeah.
It's got that sort of look. But yeah, he played for Airdrie. So Sheffield United, Airdrie and Partick Thistle were the teams he played for. Airdrie 251 games. But yeah, other than that, it was just a photograph that got me.
So we go to page 18 then. So page 18 is talking about how two former England defenders are tackling the tough job as managers. So it's Norman Hunter at Barnsley and Larry Lloyd at Wigan. Do you recall either of those players?
Norman Bite Your Legs.
Yeah.
I recall Norman well. And a very good player he was too. He wasn't just a bite your legs, he was a good footballer.
Yeah.
And those days what I recall about those days was maybe a bit after, but say 79, 80, around that time. The sense that Enzo Berto, who was the Italian coach at the time, used to sort of look at some of the people who were playing in the English defence and say, hey, if you get nothing better than that. Because, guys, English defenders look to them to be very, very basic. In a way that Italian defenders are never basic. Yeah. And, you know, Italian football continues to, in some senses, the strongest thing about Italian football has traditionally been and continues to be the quality of their defenders. We saw, yeah. I mean, did you see Juventus against Chelsea? You know, I mean, you know, the clock was turned back. I think Chelsea had 65% of the possession in an away match. You know, but it didn't make any difference. How many chances did the Juventus give them?
Yeah.
Did they have even one good chance?
Yeah. So it's talking about Norman Hunter's in the 3rd division now, managing Barnsley, and Larry Lloyd's become player manager at 4th division Wigan. I've had talks with Brian Clough and Peter Taylor about my future, and I'd made it clear that I didn't want to end my playing career in Forest reserve side. I had to be honest and realise that they weren't going to build Forest's future around 32-year-old Larry Lloyd.
I think with these two that there's talk that the nature of the players they were is completely opposite to the types of managers they were, isn't it? That Norman Hunter actually ended up, you know, with a team that played good football. Yeah, and I think a lot of people were surprised by that, but you know, he wasn't.
Well, he was a good player. I mean, Norman wasn't. He was tough, but he wasn't a bad. He was by no means. He was a good football. Full stop. Yeah. So he could get teams to play well doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, everybody you're talking about is dead. Norman's dead as well, isn't he?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Right. Okay, Andy. Well, we move on then. So page 20 was going to look at.
Yep.
Page 20. The headline is the decision Bosco dreads. And it's Bosco Jankovic, who was at Middlesbrough at the time, and a rare foreign player in English football at that time.
What's the decision he dreads?
So the career of Bosco Jankovic is at the crossroads. His contract with Middlesbrough ends this season, and in May he must decide whether to stay in the country or return to his native Yugoslavia. And his final decision will be made with the precision of a qualified lawyer, which he is. So apparently Jankovic is a hero for Aston Villa fans because he scored twice against Ipswich Town when Villa and Ipswich were going for the title in 1981, and that was what pushed Villa ahead. The Middlesbrough beat Ipswich 2-1. And so he's apparently a hero to Aston Villa fans.
Well, good reason. But Jankovic must have been very much there were very few East European players outside of East Europe in those days.
Yeah, so 1979 he moved to Middlesbrough.
Yeah. Well, if he'd been a Soviet player, he wouldn't have been able to move at all. I mean, it was because you were talking about the Yugoslavia that he moved out of was the Yugoslavia of Tito. That was by East European standards a bit more liberal, and it was certainly there was a certain amount of circulation of nothing like European Union, but the wall was slightly down. The Iron Curtain had a hole in it in those days.
Yeah. So he passed away in 1993 at the age of only 42 of natural causes.
Oh yeah,
it's nothing age, isn't it?
So Andy, do you want to say something about that article facing the page there? Scotland's keepers on the attack. Thought that was good ballpark.
Where are Scotland's keepers?
Well, at that point, it still would have been Alan Ruff and probably in the driving seat, but there would have been Jim Leighton maybe coming through. George Wood would have still been there. Billy Thompson maybe.
Yep.
And I guess that they're looking at a few of the Roy Baines, but Roy Baines was English, is he not?
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
So I guess they're not talking about from a national sense. Yeah, I think they mentioned Paddy Bonner coming in there as well. So, it's a bit of a trope, isn't it, about Scottish goalkeepers? And I don't think it's really, I think there's some truth to it, but I think it's people just being a bit lazy. I think, there's been some high-profile mistakes that they made, but then again, there's some you just look at some of the big competitions that England have been at, and the goalkeeper, Rob Green made a howler. So yeah, it happens with goalkeepers, but I just think, people have jumped on this whole idea that Scottish goalkeepers have been rubbish, whereas I actually think in my lifetime Scottish goalkeepers have maybe been better than English goalkeepers, pound for pound. I mean English goalkeeper, you've had Ray Clemence, you've had Peter Charlton, Joe Corrigan,
Gordon Banks, but other than that, really, I can't really think of any that have been outstanding. I think Joe Hart could have been outstanding, but he I don't know what happened with him after Man City. But then Scotland have got Andy Gorham, they've got Alan McGregor, even David Marshall. I think is a top or was a top quality keeper. Maybe he's not quite at the same level now, but yeah. Listen, I will always fight the goalkeeper's corner, and especially if it's a Scottish goalkeeper. Like if Jim Leighton, I will fight till my dying breath. I thought he was an outstanding goalkeeper. He had a bit of a... He had a good club career too, didn't he?
Yeah, he had a bit of a tough time down at Manchester. Alex Ferguson didn't do him any favours by dropping him.
No.
But he bounced back. He came to Scotland and played on, but... in terms of his ability as a goalkeeper, outstanding. So I will fight his corner every single day.
But you can't have Paddy Bonner as a Scottish goalkeeper because he's Irish, lads.
Yeah. Well, that's
you can't steal him now. You have to give him back.
I'll tell you that even I know a lot of Celtic supporters from that time who would be quite happy about that as well if you took him back. But I always thought Paddy Bonner was a terrific keeper. I always thought he was really solid. Again, he made some mistakes. Sometimes he came for balls, dropped it, and things like that. But the technology that keepers have nowadays, the gloves and all that sort of stuff, and even the balls and the state of the pitches. The pitches back then, mud, all that sort of really, caked in mud. So it was difficult to take balls.
Tell you something about Paddy though. On the morning of that game I was talking about earlier, the 1988 opening round England v Ireland game in Germany, Paddy was, like a lot of players, was worked up and ready for the game, but he was getting very worried, and he went round to see Jack in the hotel and banged on the door, and Jack opened the door and said, "What do you want, Paddy?" And Paddy walks in and he said, "Boss, my shoulders, there's something wrong with my shoulder. I can't play. And Big Jack looked at him and he went on, if I do this and do that. And Jack just looked at him for a long time and said, "Oh, don't worry, Packy, you'll be all right." No, get out of here. And of course, he played. There's nothing wrong with him. He had a great game. He was one of the heroes of that game.
Yeah, brilliant.
So over the page, we've got goal lines, which is the letters to shoot. So we're going to look at the star letter. So the star letter is FIFA must tighten ruling. But first of all, the thing you mentioned about the star letter, I mean nothing to you, Paddy, but this week's star letter comes from John Mackay of Hillington, Glasgow, who wins a special prize of £10. And John Mackay went on to be the premier sort of newsreader for Scotland Today, Scotland's sort of flagship 6 p.m. news show. And we did tweet him to say, was this you who wrote this letter? They said, yes, it was. But he can't remember what he did with the £10. But the letter goes, in recent years, the methods used to permit players to play for international teams have become farcical. We now have situations in which players qualify to play for national sides by virtue of the fact that their great-grandparents came from the country. Craig Johnson of Middlesbrough actually had the opportunity to play for Scotland, England, Wales, Northern Ireland era, South Africa or Australia. George Berry of Wales could have played for any of the home nations or West Germany. I'm not attacking these players. If they have the chance, the best of luck to them, but I am appealing against the system that allows the situation to arise.
Yeah. Well, you could start that one up again. One of the key figures in the Italian team who won the European Championships this year was Jorginho, who was, he had an Italian grandfather, obviously, but Italian lineage, but he's not Italian. Mm-hmm. Likewise, Toloi in defence is not Italian. But I mean, it was the same with the it was Jack's success with Ireland was based on he looked around and he went to Oxford United and he found Ray Houghton and he found the striker whose name escapes.
John Aldridge.
John Aldridge, yeah, exactly. He found the two of them. But there's a story about Ray. I'm sure to a certain extent it's largely true, which is that at some point, now I can't remember the year because I wasn't there, but it was at some point Ireland were drawing the same World Cup qualifying group as Scotland, and the Andy Roxburgh was the Scotland manager at the time, and I think Ireland played very well in Glasgow. They got a result.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I don't know if they won, but certainly they got a result. And one of the outstanding players on the right was Ray Houghton. Ray, as I'm sure you know, he was not Irish. He's Irish blood in him, but he was Scots, and very much so. And allegedly, he said to Roxburgh said to him afterwards, you should have been playing for us. And Houghton said, well, you guys had your chance, because he'd been rejected by a Scottish club and the Scottish youth team at a certain point.
I think that's happened a few times, isn't it, Lisa? Did Aidan McGeady, was he rejected, or did he just choose to play?
Same thing,
yeah.
So I mean, the point the letter writer is making is that it's ridiculous that people who aren't 100%. I have phones ringing, lads. Better just think.
Right. Somebody wants to speak to you.
Yeah, badly.
Yeah, so just on the letter there, I mean, John's at least saying, listen, it's the rules that need to change, and that's what I guess the whole thing is that Jack Charlton did. Craig Brown did it for Scotland. It's like, if these are the rules, then we've got to use them to our advantage.
course, yeah. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's also if you decide, you can also argue that looking for some sort of ethnic purity when it comes to picking a team is debatable, at least. You know.
Yeah. It's not a great look, really, if you stand back, is it? Saying that.
No.
Yeah.
No, but it's also people who've got all sorts of, maybe a majority of people have got only English parents or only Welsh parents and only Welsh grandparents and only Welsh great-grandparents. But I would have thought there are probably a minority of them. If you look at people's family trees, you don't have to go very far before, another nationality slips in. And in the multinational and the multi-ethnic world we live in, that becomes more and more the case day by day.
Yeah. Tom, should we jump to the focus on?
Yes, let's do that, and then we'll just touch on one more on the magazine and let you get away then, Paddy. So hand over to Andy for this bit.
Right. So what we're going to do is, if you remember the focus on features in Shoot, where they would ask a footballer certain questions, and that's what we're going to do with yourself, Paddy. So I'm just going to fire some questions at you if you give me your answers. Full name?
Alexander Patrick Agnew.
What's your birthplace?
Ballymoney, County Derry, Northern Ireland.
Okay. What was your first car?
What was my first car?
Yes.
Oh, it was a Volkswagen Beetle. Very, very beat up Volkswagen Beetle.
Okay. What's your favourite player of all time?
Maradona.
Favourite team?
I find that one a hard one, but if for personal reasons, I'd settle for the Napoli side, Maradona's Napoli side in the 1987 season.
Okay. What's the most memorable match that you've witnessed?
Well, that would be either the Italy's semi-final win in 2006 against Germany and Borussia in Dortmund, or the final against France. They toss up between them.
Okay. What's the best country that you visited?
For football?
Just for pleasure, football, just the best country that you've enjoyed?
Spain. Spent a lot of time in Spain over the years, and particularly Andalusia, right down the south of Spain. Love that.
And I'm looking forward to this one. What's your favourite food?
I think I had my favourite food at lunch today, which is a local pasta they make here. It's called lungorucci. I had lungorucci a guanciale. Guanciale is a type of bacon. Right. And then there are tomatoes and onions and things as well. And that is, I can tell you, lads, is a very, very good pasta.
Yeah, I knew I was going to like that answer. Miscellaneous, so give me a couple of things that you like to do.
A couple of things I like to do. Swim. I live in on the Lago di Bracciano, which is a lake, and it's been a long, hot, wonderful summer, and we swam a lot, and I love that. And if you're a boy from Kilrea in County Derry, I wasn't swimming in the lakes there. It was much too cold.
Yeah. Okay, miscellaneous dislikes. So a couple of things that drive you up the wall.
Things that drive me up the wall. The only thing that drives me up the wall is my own forgetfulness as I get older.
Okay, we'll take that for the two of them then. What's your favourite TV show of all time?
Favourite TV show? God knows. That's in this house. There's a lot of TVs watched. My favourite TV show. It's very hard to know where to go there. It'd be certainly the wife when she's feeling a bit depressed loves to put on old edition of Friends. That business. People watching Friends. And I thought it was a very silly thing to do in a waste of time. And then, of course, I've sat down beside her and watched it. And I have to admit that it's a very good way to unwind with some non-violent, non-upsetting TV.
Okay. Who's been the biggest influence on you?
Well, in professional terms, a man called Vincent Brown, who was the editor of McGill, who gave me my first job in journalism. When I was, when there was no reason to give me a good job, you had to have a certain notion that this guy could probably do a job for me.
Hmm.
I mean, when I met Vincent, I'd been living in a cottage in the Wicklow Mountains on my own for 3 years. In a cottage with no running water, no toilet, no light, and reading John Dos Passos and War and Peace and Carlos Castaneda and all sorts of things that nobody has ever heard of nowadays. But I lived a very strange life. I was very young at the time, but I was a complete dropout. And you remember the term dropout?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was one. And then decided to better drop in again and get a job and do some work. And Vincent Brown was one of the people who I wrote letters to people, and he was one of the people who replied. And he replied about 6 months late, but he replied, and he got me started in journalism.
Excellent.
And I'm eternally grateful to him.
Brilliant. Okay, last question. And considering some of the people who I know you've met, this is going to be a tough one. Which person in the world would you most like to meet?
Which person in the world would I most like to meet?
Yeah.
That's a great question. That's a great question. Well, I've met a lot of very interesting people. I mean, I've met a lot of, 3 popes and kings and prime ministers and politicians of all, because my journalistic life hasn't just been about football. But I think if the person I'd most like to meet would be something very cliched like Shakespeare, but that'd be a bit hard.
No, it's okay. We accept dead people as well, so we'll go with that. And I have to say, I got the best message from Tom about arranging this podcast, where he says Paddy can't do the show on a Wednesday because he's meeting the Pope. And I just thought, right, okay, that's the best excuse ever for not being able to meet the Pope.
I wasn't quite meeting the Pope, but I was at a meeting with the Irish president and the Pope.
Right.
I was on the sidelines, so I wasn't part of the discussion.
Brilliant. Okay, I'll hand back over to Tom. Thank you for answering the questions. Back to you, Tom.
Yep, thanks, Paddy. Well, I was just going to quickly ask a wee bit about that, about covering the Vatican, and what that entails for you, and if that actually gives you access to the various popes that there's been over the years.
Well, I'm a Northern Protestant, so I'm somebody who arrived here, and as a freelance journalist, I was looking around for stories, and the biggest story in town here is the fact that the Pope lives in Rome, and so I, start to try and understand what's going on in the Vatican. And I'm still trying to understand, but I mean, it's access to popes. No, I have no access to popes. Only a very small number of people have access to popes. But what is true is that following the Vatican is a remarkable, is an extraordinary gig in the sense that every shaker and maker in the world, from Madonna to Barack Obama to Vladimir Putin, turns up in the Vatican at some point. So you get a chance. Not from a distance, obviously, but you just get a sense of people, and that in journalistic terms is fantastic.
Great. So we'll let you get away now, Paddy. If we can just
you better, I'll get roasted when I turn up late for training.
Can we just look at the Maradona? There's a 2-page spread Maradona. I think it's next pages 24 and 25. Just have a wee look at that, Paddy, and then we'll let you get away. So Maradona, the $4 million man. So there's pictures there of Maradona playing football on the beach, relaxing with the family, sitting under one of the old-fashioned hairdryers, and playing with Argentina. So you must have seen Maradona. You mentioned it earlier on, playing over the years in Italy.
Yeah. No, Maradona was a mainstay of my early years here, because he was so fantastic. I would go down to, in those days. I mean, I didn't have very much money in those days, but I would still try and get down to Naples every now and again to see him play. I was there the day that they won the championship for the first time in 1987. the season, and they beat Fiorentina. And I was done plenty of other occasions, but what I remember, and nobody's going to contradict me, is that, you know, he was one of those players who, and there are not many of them, who could win games on his own, and he did it often enough for Napoli, and he did it for Argentina, I remember, you know, everybody remembers his goal against England, both the hand of God and the extraordinary second goal. But I remember before that tournament, he started to train very hard and he started to get himself fit. And, you know, already there were stories about Maradona's lifestyle and how he wasn't training properly, wasn't fit. And I don't think he ever was, except for a few brief periods in his professional career, absolutely 100% fit and ready for it. But one place where he was Mexico in 1986. He went on he used to come up to Rome to have a particular Italian what we call a personal trainer these days, put him through stuff, and he trained very, very hard. He was very, very fit, and the results were there in Mexico. And if he'd managed to live a life like that for his career, it would have been something quite extraordinary.
Oh, we'll let you go now, Paddy.
Yeah, well, I'll get shot if I don't.
Well, I appreciate your time. Thanks very much for taking the time to chat with us.
Okay, lads. Okay.
Appreciate your time.
I better go.
No problem. Thank you, Paddy.
Phone's ringing again.
Right. Take care.
Thanks, Paddy.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers, bye.
So thanks to Paddy Agnew, and thanks to everyone for listening. Make sure you follow the podcast, and thanks to Tom for being Tom.
Thank you, Andy.
And as we say, follow the podcast, share with your friends, give us some feedback. Until the next time, let's shoot the breeze.